Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed this free clip of aggressive progressives on the Young Turks. This is just a preview of what you will receive with TYT membership. That means exclusive interviews, panel discussions, and more of Jimmy, and of course, me. Check out this next clip, and if you like what you see, you can access full episodes of Aggressive Progressives by becoming a member. Head to tyt.com/join now.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Aggressive Progressives. I'm your host, Jimmy Dore. We have a big show. Let me just tell you who's here. We have Steve-O, the Raging Agent is here. We have from the robust opposition, it's Lauren Steiner is with us. Also the miserable liberal, Stef Zamorano is here.
I'm miserable.
We're going to have Tim Canova is going to come on really soon to talk about his race and the recount and all the problems that are happening in Broward County. And then we're going to talk with author of Listen Liberal and What's the Matter with Kansas, Thomas Frank will be with us later on, and he's going to discuss the midterms plus his new book, Rendezvous with Oblivion. Rendezvous with Oblivion. Thomas Frank, one of my favorite authors. Listen Liberal is what made me a radical. So, and what got me into a lot of trouble. I would be just like you if I didn't read that book. But I read that book, and now my eyes are open, and you can't unknow something. Once a brain, once expanded, never regains its former shape. So the midterms happened. I wanted to show everybody. Michigan Democratic governor-elect puts Blue Cross Blue Shield executive on transition team after the company funded her campaign. And my thing was, wow, that was quick. Look at that. She didn't even wait. Boom. She's not even in office already. She's put in the CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield. And now you know why people don't vote. Now you know why Hillary Clinton didn't win Michigan. Now you know why progressive ballot measures win, yet Democrats continue to lose. Why did Claire McCaskill lose when minimum wage won? Maybe because the stink of the corrupted corporate Democratic Party that's been sticking a shiv into the back of voters and workers for the last 40 years is not gonna wear off in one election cycle. Maybe that's the problem. That's what I think. Well, let me throw it to my panel. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's right. Because there's a lot of love for certain policies. And if you ask Americans, if you take away the labels and you ask them on the policy itself, where do you stand on the issue of, universal health care, minimum wage,
ending the wars,
money in politics, climate change issues and protecting the environment, it's like 80% lean progressive.
Right.
But when it comes to the candidates, there's a disconnect between those progressive policies and what the Democrats stand for. So people, when they have a choice, they vote for the policies, but they don't vote for the candidates because the candidates do not represent those policies.
I think the Democratic Party has a stink, like Lauren, like in Florida, they passed the ballot measure that gave the felons the right to vote. That's a super progressive idea, yet Gillum right now is still neck and neck. He might not win. So the super progressive ballot measure wins, yet the Democratic candidate doesn't win. And my theory is it's the stench of the Democratic Party. What do you think?
Well, I think with Gillum, he did tack to the center after he won the primary. And he did float out there campaigning with Hillary, but they pulled that back pretty quickly. I was on his Twitter when he tweeted that he was going to do that, and out of 1,200 comments, there were maybe about 4 that were positive about that idea. But the fact of the matter is, he is talking about Medicaid expansion. Gretchen Whitmer is talking about Medicaid expansion. So I don't throw shade on people that try to do incremental things. A lot of people are very happy with Obamacare. I, of course, fight for single payer. As you know, I've disrupted Dianne Feinstein events, Brad Sherman events, Adam Schiff events to try to get them to support single payer. But I think that anybody that does incremental things that help people, I'm not going to, criticize that. But I think that they also, like Bernie Sanders, why did Bernie Sanders endorse Mike Levin when Mike Levin didn't agree to co-sponsor, HR 676? That was strange to me. He didn't endorse Katie Hill or Katie Porter, who are all for Medicare for all, and yet he endorses Mike Levin. Now, what he should have done was endorse Doug Applegate in the primary, who was for single payer. So this is weird. And he endorses Amar Kampa-Najjar, who was the Obama staffer, the Clinton supporter. And James Alaya told me that Amar wouldn't even appear on the stage with him in the Oceanside rally. He said, quote, "Bernie doesn't poll well in my district." So can you imagine somebody turning down an opportunity to be on the stage with Bernie?
In California, it doesn't make sense, right? Steph, what do you make of it?
Well, I think that how is it not a winning point position to take to run right of Reagan as a Democrat?
I know, right?
Right? That seems like what they're doing. And I just have to say, like, I don't see the Democrats having a clear platform. And until they get that clear platform that represents the needs of the people, I don't see them being able to make even incremental progress.
Well, we talked about it briefly on the show last week. The Latinos that were polled, 64% of them said they had no idea what the Democratic Party stands for, which is just like the rest of us, I think. So here, this is from the New York Times, and they asked a dumb question. Should Democrats pick a 2020 candidate who can aim for the center and pick up votes from disenchanted Trump voters? That was Chuck Schumer and Hillary Clinton's idea. They were gonna, for every working class blue collar worker they lost, they're gonna pick it up with a suburban white collar person, and you can repeat that in Pennsylvania and Ohio and
a suburban
Republican. Yeah. Or should they veer to the left with a progressive who can electrify the grassroots? The midterms haven't made the answer any clearer. Well, here's what Matt Taibbi, he then tweeted out, said, Claire McCaskill, I hope that no one thinks that because some of the red state Democrat moderates lost, that means we have to nominate a progressive. So here's what, and then our friend Greg Amita says, yet Trump supporters in Missouri voted for progressive ballot measures, like raising the minimum wage while rejecting McCaskill. It can be about electrifying the base and picking up votes from the other side. Aiming for the center is like Starbucks selling tacos to beat Taco Bell. And that's exactly what I think. What he's saying is this is a false choice. That you don't have to run to the center or be progressive. You can be progressive and pick up necessary right-wing votes if you need them, because it was just proven in Missouri when the minimum wage passed that there's a lot of Trump voters voting for progressive ballot measures. Just like in Florida, there's a lot of DeSantis voters voting for progressive ballot measures. So this is a crazy choice. You don't have to be either or. What Steve just said is that if you look at the policies always poll well, progressive policies. And people are progressive, they just don't know it. People are forgetting money out of politics, ending the war. They're for Medicare for all. 52% of Republicans are for Medicare for all. That means 52% of Trump voters are for Medicare for all, and 8 out of 9, if almost 9 out of 10 of the Democratic voters are for Medicare for all. So you can electrify your base and you can pick up the suburban white or the Trump blue collar voter, which is exactly what they need to do. That's what I think. The problem is that people hate the Democratic brand, the brand of Democrats, and that even though they might agree on some policy, first of all, the Democrats don't even embrace the policy. Did Claire McCaskill even embrace that? Was she running on? I don't know. I wasn't in Missouri, and I know some people don't. You're not supposed to talk about states you don't live in. Some people say, But was she running on a full-throated progressive campaign of minimum wage? Let's raise that minimum wage. Maybe she was, I don't know. But that's the reason why she got elected in the first place, because they put minimum wage on the ballot. And just like when the conservatives and the Republicans used to put gay marriage on the ballot to get their base out, with every time the minimum wage is on the ballot, it is a winner. And so that's what the Democrats need to be doing more of. Go ahead.
But it's not like this is a mystery. I mean, we know this, right? I mean, why did Doug Jones win? Doug Jones won because he had record turnout by black voters,
right?
Who campaigned and rallied for two things. They wanted Medicaid expansion,
right?
And they wanted a higher minimum wage. Those issues resonate. It resonates across, racial, gender, sexual orientation, basically every line. Everybody wants that. But going back to Gillum and the issues that we have in Florida and Georgia, I think it's more complicated than just the stink of the Democratic brand. There's certainly that, but there's also massive voter suppression. There's issues of racism, just flat out racism, right?
Right.
Yeah, there's definitely
sexism. There are those issues as well, right? But I think those issues can be overcome by a strong progressive message.
Why don't you think Lauren? Why don't you think the Democrats are screaming more about voter suppression? Why is it all left up to Greg Palast?
That's a mystery to me. Also, why is Bernie talking about it now, but not in his own race?
Voter suppression?
Yeah.
Oh, you mean from the 2016 election?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, why do you? Well, I think we all know the answers to those Bernie questions, by the way.
Well.
Because he wants to run in 2020 and do it on the Democratic platform, and Tom Perez gets to unilaterally decide if he can do that or not. So he has to play nice with the Democrats, which is what he's doing. Which is why he didn't endorse anybody who was primarying a corporate Democrat. Did you notice that?
I did notice that. But what's interesting about the Democratic brand is Kristen Sinema, who just won last night. She picked up Arizona, right? She used to be very progressive. She was a protester. She was a Green Party member. And now she says that Joe Manchin is her role model.
Oh.
She literally said that. So now we have a person who is... They're cheering that we now picked up another Democrat in the Senate, but a Democrat who's like Joe Manchin, who voted for Kavanaugh, we don't need, that's a Republican.
All right, that's, wow, I didn't know she said that, Lauren. Thanks for ruining my day. All right, we'll be right back. We're up against a break. We'll be right back with Tim Canova and Thomas Frank and a lot more in just a minute. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Aggressive Progressives. I'm joined by Steve O, Lauren Steiner, and Stef Zamorano. And right now we have joining us via Skype is our #1 progressive from Florida. It's Tim Canova. Hi Tim, how you doing?
Hi there, Jimmy. Doing well. How are you?
I just want to let Tim Canova, just let everybody know if you don't know, if you're not familiar with Tim, he was an independent candidate for Congress in Florida's 23rd Congressional District. He was challenging the incumbent, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and he's also been on the receiving end of Democratic Party dirty tricks and election tampering, not only in the 2016 race against Debbie Wasserman Schultz, but in the recently concluded 2018 race as well. Tim, you look much better than I would be looking had I had gone through the stuff that you've gone through. So in 2016, you decided to primary Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was a noted cheater of Bernie Sanders and the progressives. She had to step down because it was revealed she was lying and cheating. And then you ran against her, and you felt you did pretty good, and you wanted to examine the ballots. And tell me what happened from there.
So yeah, in the aftermath of the 2016 race, we put in a public records request to inspect the ballots. And the long and short of it is that the supervisor of elections, Brenda Snipes, who I guess is sort of becoming a household name at this point, finally, she stonewalled us for months. I filed a lawsuit to enforce our rights to inspect the ballots. And while the lawsuit was pending, Snipes destroyed all of the ballots. So it was essentially tampering with evidence, obstructing justice, violating federal and state criminal statutes punishable as felonies by up to 5 years in prison, lying to the court, perjuring herself on a destruction order. The list goes on. And we proved our case in court. The Florida Circuit Court granted a summary judgment, had a 10-page order that found all of these violations that I just listed. And for that matter, Snipes even admitted to the destruction of the ballots on sworn videotape deposition. So I thought when all of that broke and we won on summary judgment, that Rick Scott, the governor, would fire the supervisor of elections, replace her with a new team, and that there'd be criminal law enforcement agencies getting involved with investigating the wrongdoing. And how wrong I was, none of that happened. And of course, it got back to me that the reason it didn't happen was they just wanted to protect the status quo. They all had the same corporate backers, the same donors. At that point, I thought about dropping out of this race, running as an independent. And I said quite often, there's no reason they won't just rig this one against me. They got away with it last time. They could do the same exact thing they may have done last time, which the theories are they rigged the software and then threw out the ballots to protect themselves. So here we are, in the final weeks of my campaign. The campaign was certainly on fire, and we had a much stronger ground game than any of the other candidates. There had been a Floridian press report of a poll that I never saw, but the report itself was something in that the report said that this Republican poll had me tied with Wasserman Schultz at 34% each in a dead heat with the Republican way back in the low teens. And when that news broke, a lot of Democrats who were sitting on the fence, they didn't want to split the vote and end up electing a Republican. They started breaking our way. And a lot of Republicans who just want Wasserman Schultz out already started breaking our way. So in the final days, it really had the feel of victory again. We were very hopeful. And, it's hard to tell exactly what's going to happen, but the final results they gave smack of vindictive punishment and not accurate at all. I think they put us down at around 5% or something like that.
So what they did was they gave you, you got about half as many votes in this general election as you got in a primary in 2016, exactly. Which just strains credulity because you're much more well-known now. Debbie Wasserman Schultz is much more unpopular now.
Yes.
And just like you said, Republicans are itching to get her out. And that poll it wasn't released, but it was reported on, that showed you two neck and neck. So, and then to come out, it seems exactly like what you just said, that this was them sending a message. Don't you dare try to do this again, because look, exactly. We have all the power, we can do whatever we want, and there are no checks and balances because we all have the same donors. I think that's the key that people are missing. When a judge agreed with you that there had been illegal ballot destruction, you thought that now the Republican governor would do something about it. But no, because you're the guy who's the progressive who doesn't take the corporate money. They all do. They all have the same donors. They're all part of the same neoliberal infrastructure. And so Debbie Wasserman Schultz's donors are the same donors that the Republican Party has. So that's why they didn't do anything, because if they did something to her, you would get in and their donors would be upset because you're the guy who's gonna upset the status quo, not somebody like Debbie Wasserman Schultz. I think that's the key point, right?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Now, I want to go ahead.
Well, as long as we have electronic voting machines, it makes it very easy for them to do this, I think.
So I just want to show, you tweeted this out, caught on video. Concerned citizen sees ballots being transported in private vehicles and transferred to rented truck on election night. This violates all chain of custody requirements for paper ballots. Were the ballots destroyed and replaced by a set of fake ballots? Investigate now. So here's a little bit, I'm just going to show a little bit of this video.
I know it's dark and it's hard to see. I think like two ladies just walked up there with the provisional ballots, walking back into the precinct. And a bag of, the paper ballots. And I said to them, I go, what, you just can carry those around? And they said, no, the truck left them. But the truck's right here, so I'm not real sure what the hell's going on here. But I don't think it's right.
Tim, now tell us what do you think we're seeing here? Now, you've seen this video. Tell us what you think we're seeing.
Well, I've talked to election lawyers about it. And I've been told by election lawyers that it shows a breakdown in the chain of custody, that under Florida law, when those ballots are removed from the electronic voting machines, they're stuffed into these big blue satchels, which you see in the video. Now, they're going to be transported to the supervisor of elections warehouse in Lauderhill. Here, you see a line of cars driven by one person. Those ballots are always supposed to be in the custody of two people, never of one. And then when they're transferred, they're being transferred onto the back of a truck, a rented truck, an enterprise truck, I believe. The lawyers tell me there should have been a sheriff's deputy there signing for those ballots. The sheriff's deputy would then transport the ballots to the supervisor's Lauderhill warehouse. So none of that happened. And when the chain of custody is broken on the paper ballots, it basically means you can't have any confidence in a hand recount of paper ballots. So now we have a supervisor of elections here who already has a history of destroying ballots in a very important congressional primary. So it's not too far-fetched for folks to be wondering, is that what they're doing? Instead of waiting some months after the election, are they doing it election night?
You know, it's just amazing, too, the lack of coverage this got, considering that Debbie Wasserman Schultz was part of the biggest election fraud ever committed in the history of the United States, which was the Democratic primary in 2016, right? And that was revealed by Donna Brazile. So, are you surprised at the lack of coverage that you've gotten, and what do you think is going to happen going forward?
I hate to say surprised. I should know better. Some months ago, when we won on summary judgment, I thought that was going to be the turning point in our campaign, the vindication for me. The news coverage would follow, the media blackout would end. None of that happened. Of course, it's a painful lesson for everybody that this corporate media just is not going to be following a story like this unless it affects one of their corporate politicians, corporate funded.
Right.
Governor Rick Scott, I remember I reached out to him through a lawyer who's well connected in Republican circles, and they had all kinds of excuses why they were afraid to move forward, and they were political excuses more than anything. And I remember saying, if you keep her in office, that's a moral hazard. Somebody who got away with that kind of felonies already, there'll be every incentive for her to continue doing it. And it'll come back and bite us all in the rear end in the next election. And certainly, Rick Scott, I think over the last few days has felt that Brenda Snipes has not been working for him, but quite the opposite, trying to undermine whatever small lead he had going in.
So it's like all Republicans, Rick Scott can't understand a problem until it affects him personally. Lauren Steiner is here. Lauren has a question for you.
Hi, Tim.
Sure. Hi, Lauren. Hi there.
So you know that I've been arguing with one of your detractors on Twitter about you being on Fox News. So this is what I want to ask you. He's basically saying that you are being a useful idiot, Jimmy and I love this word, for DeSantis and for Rick Scott, because you know that Fox News does not care about your election, and they just want to try to prove the Republicans' case that there's election rigging, but in favor of the Democrats. So how do you respond to that?
Well, my only motivation is to speak the truth about all of this. And I'd be glad to go on MSNBC or CNN, on really any news outlet, right or left or center, it doesn't matter to me. I think what we're dealing with here is much bigger than Andrew Gillum versus DeSantis or Bill Nelson versus Rick Scott. Those elections are not going to be decided by Fox News. Those elections are going to be decided on these recounts and litigation that comes out of the recounts. And my guess is, from what I'm hearing, there could be $100 million in legal fees generated from these two contested elections. What I'm talking about deals with Broward County. When all of these recounts and all the litigation is done, all those candidates will go back to Tallahassee or wherever. Those of us who live here in Broward County have got to deal with this swamp, though. And this is a swamp, all right. Republicans and Democrats and independents alike have very little confidence in Brenda Snipes, and not just her. She's a figurehead in many ways. The entire apparatus below her, beneath her. There's very little confidence that the election results are real, and I say this talking to Republicans who ran in their primaries just a few months ago in late August. None of them believe, I shouldn't say none, but several of the important races that I got involved with, the losing candidates in these Republican primaries, just don't have any faith or confidence in the election results anymore.
Okay, Tim. Well, I appreciate you taking time out for us today. What do you think is going to go forward with especially your case? So do you think anything's going to happen?
Well, I know there are a bunch of statisticians who are working on analyzing the numbers, and I haven't seen the product of their work yet. I'm hearing through the grapevine that they've discovered serious statistical anomalies. I can tell you among them that what I do know is that at the very precinct level, apparently the numbers don't add up. Simple math, when you add up the number of votes that were cast by early voting, election day voting, absentee balloting, or vote by mail as it's known here, and provisional balloting, there are some precincts where it says 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 equals 26. So those are some basic math questions that folks have. How you can come up with any kind of a figure if you can't tell where the votes are coming from. So that's the statistical side, I guess. There are folks who want to sue for a recount. I'm sure that they pushed me way down if they did rig this so that it would make it difficult for me to seek a recount. There are a lot of others, I should say, Republicans especially, who want to sue to invalidate the election to strike down the entire election and have a new vote. Now, there is precedent for that in Florida and around the country. It does happen at times. I personally think there are a number of factors that would help that argument. One would be the break of the chain of custody of the paper ballots. But in addition to that, just taking a look at Brenda Snipes, the crimes that she's committed in the past as far as tampering and destruction of evidence, how do you have any confidence in her in supervising the present election? I really would not venture to guess what the legal outcome of any of those kind of lawsuits could be. For me personally, this is 2 elections that I've put myself out there in. Both elections had the feel of victory by the end, and it's not just me saying it, it's really lots of folks who were here on the ground. And both came out the way they did under very suspicious circumstances. My conclusion is a very personal one, which is why would I or anyone who's a progressive, who's anti-establishment, anti-corruption, anti-machine, run for office in any jurisdiction in this country where there are electronic voting machines that are inherently vulnerable to hacking or to software manipulation? To me, this speaks to the larger issue that we can talk about Medicare for all and we can talk about the horse race of any particular election. None of that time and effort and campaign donations and hard work of volunteers and protests are going to mean anything if we don't have fair elections. And to have fair elections that are really transparent and verifiable, you've got to have paper ballots that are hand marked, that are counted by hand in public by the citizens of this country. And I just spoke to a reporter for The Guardian, and I asked him, I said, my understanding is in Britain, this is the way you do it. And he did confirm that is the way it's done, the old-fashioned way that you can actually verify by counting the votes where the votes are cast, counting them in public. I say allow videotaping, allow photographs, make it as public and transparent as possible. But until that day comes, I don't foresee any big breakthroughs for progressives. We have the issues on our side. We have the public opinion polls on those issues on our side. And yet somehow the establishment keeps winning these elections. Bernie Sanders went into 2016 saying the system is rigged. And yet he hasn't really focused in on the nitty gritty of how the system is rigged. I think our 2 campaigns has shed some light on that. And I do think that the electoral system in this country is a very problematic one. I'd use the word rigged for sure.
I would agree with that. Greg Palast certainly would agree with that. We saw what's happening all over the country. Tim Canova, I'm sure we're going to talk to you more about this. Good luck going forward, and we're going to keep a close eye on your situation. Thanks a lot for taking time.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right, we'll be right back in a minute. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Aggressive Progressives. I'm here with Raging Agent Steve-O. Lauren Steiner from the Robust Opposition is here, and the Miserable Liberal, Stef Zamorano. There's been a lot of hoopla going on about Jim Acosta and CNN and the way Trump has been treating the press. And he calls them the enemy of the people. And apparently that's, you can't do that. You're not supposed to do that. And so I just want to remind people, and I brought this up to Cenk on election night too, that people are using Trump's animosity towards the press or his hyperbolic language towards the press as a shield from actual criticism that they actually deserve, right? So I just wanted to remind people that, people who are rallying around Jim Acosta and the corporate news need to remember that the corporate news is not your friend, that the corporate news is corporate. And that their interest serves the corporation and the donors, not you, which is why Jake Tapper tells us that Medicare for all is more expensive than the system we have right now. So that's a lie that Jake Tapper is allowed to say at the top of his lungs on a big platform like CNN, and progressives like us are supposed to now rally around CNN. That is not happening as far as I'm concerned. And I want to just give a real brief history of what the Young Turks is about, what I think this show is about, what the Jimmy Dore show is about media criticism, because that's what has let us down. And I just want to remind people during the aftermath of the Iraq War, most of the people still thought that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, and that drove Cenk crazy. And I want to just show a little bit of that.
Show the goddamn paper right here, okay? What is USA safer? Bush says. Picture. Headline, USA safer, Bush says. Okay. USA Today, you suck balls. You are a terrible newspaper. You know what he did in that press conference yesterday and how we covered it? He lied over and over about how this is a war between Al-Qaeda and Iraq. It's not a war between Al-Qaeda and Iraq. It's a war between Shiites and Sunnis. Civil war that we're stuck in. And what does the USA Today incompetent losers say? USA safer, Bush says. That is a lie. They've done a terrible job. Every one of these editors in every major newspaper, in every major magazine, in every major television news organization should be fired today.
Wow, that's pretty fiery. They USA Today, they do suck balls. So that's
the underrated part of this whole video is Michael Schur, and just the way he was so polite, and he just took the berating from Cenk.
He did take a berating, but he was saying some pretty stuff that would make you upset.
Yeah.
He was defending the press in that situation, and there was Cenk, going full nuclear on the press. And he was right. Cenk was right, by the way, I think, in my opinion.
Cenk was right, yeah.
Well, we understand the concept of protecting press.
Yes.
But we don't abide by protecting corporate tools.
Right.
I mean, that's the big difference.
Well, I'm also trying to explain people the animosity towards the press is not just on the right. It's not just Trump supporters. There's Cenk Uygur, home of the progressives, calling out the press unilaterally. Every editor in every paper should be fired because they've done a bad job. So this isn't just a phenomenon with Trump that the press and the establishment wants you to think it is. And let's remember when Bernie Sanders was running is when a lot of progressives really woke up to just how bad the corporate media is, and it is really bad. Right? So if you go to my computer, remember Fair caught this. Washington Post ran 16 negative stories on Bernie Sanders in 16 hours. That was from the primary in March of 2016. We know what the deal is. And this leads to this.
Sanders rally is happening right now. Now he has not come out to give a speech yet, but there is a big crowd there. And apparently they started a couple of chants. I believe you're going to enjoy them. This is a periscope from the event.
Chanting CNN sucks about 10 minutes ago. They said the same thing and they called for the Young Turks, chanting TYT, TYT. Basically, they're calling out the mainstream media for the coverage of this election.
So the left has a grievance with the press. They en masse, in public, chant CNN sucks. Now apparently, because this is going on, here's Jim Acosta. Now he goes to Trump rallies and basically the exact same thing happens at a Trump rally, but now it's all new. It's like it never happened before, like nobody ever had a problem with the press. So here he is, he says, just a sample of the sad scene we faced at a Trump rally in Tampa. I'm very worried that the hostility whipped up by Trump and some in conservative media will result in somebody getting hurt. We should not treat our fellow Americans this way. The press is not the enemy. Well, that is not what the left and the right think, Jim. Maybe you should go, oh, why? So when progressives show up, they say we suck. When Trump voters show up, they say we suck. Maybe we suck. Maybe there's something wrong with CNN and corporate news. No, he puts it back on them. And here, well, I want to show you. He tweets this out. Here's the video. So here's the video of the people flipping him off. By the way, they look pretty docile. They look very docile, if you ask me. Guy, he's got it. The media. He's got it. Or there it is. So there's a guy flipping him off. There's a guy yelling, "Tell the truth." This guy, stop lying, tell the truth, right? Which sounds a lot like stuff that people at a Bernie rally would yell at CNN. And but here's the interesting part about Jim Acosta. I always knew he was a grandstander, and I always knew he was doing bad journalism. And so now there's a gentleman named Evan Axelbank. He works for Fox 13. He says Trump supporters can boo and say forever that they hate CNN and Jim Acosta. But after the cameras are off, all I see is them asking his opinion on everything under the sun. And if they can take pictures with him, it's quite a phenomenon. And he handles it like a pro. So what that tells me about Jim Acosta is that Jim Acosta is a self-serving, self-aggrandizing, grandstanding corporate tool, which he is. And so now everybody's rallying around Jim Acosta because Trump is rude to him. Okay, I'll show. But here's what I love what Michael Tracy says about Jim Acosta. He says it would be easier to defend Jim Acosta's right to access people in power if he produced something of value, such as genuine adversarial journalism rather than infantile TV brawl entertainment. Jim Acosta asks unintelligent questions, but happens to annoy Trump, so has been anointed a journalistic hero by idiots.
I'd like to interject
Go
here
ahead.
because I was a history major and I did my thesis on progressives and muckrakers.
Yes.
Okay, so during the progressive era, the news media did what they were supposed to do, which is speak truth to power. And right now, we had a change about the time when Larry Tisch from the Lowe's Corporation bought CBS from William Paley. William Paley
When was that?
That was in the 80s.
Okay.
So William Paley started the CBS radio network, and he put on Edward R. Murrow. And as you know, Edward R. Murrow was the one who challenged Joseph McCarthy and his Russian witch hunts, okay? So now I have a hashtag for...
Lauren, hang on one second. We got a break. We're up against a break. I'll let you finish that story in just 1 minute when we come back with more from Lauren Steiner.
Hey guys, we hope you enjoy this free clip of Aggressive Progressives on the Young Turks. This is just a preview of what you will receive with TYT membership. That means exclusive interviews, panel discussions, and more of Jimmy, and of course, me. If you like what you saw, you can access full episodes of Aggressive Progressives by becoming a member. Head to tyt.com/join now.